Hey guys, so I come to you with sort of a TBR, sort of a pile of possibilities, as cousin of always doing always says. Because as I have indicated many times, TBRs don't often work for me. But there are two events coming up on BookTube that I am sort of interested in. And one at least I know I'm gonna be sort of partly participating in, and the other I think is kind of an interesting idea. So the first is probably one that you've heard of. It's Victober 2019. I don't talk much about Victorian literature on my channel. It's not exactly my forte. But I have read some. I mean, I've read the Brontes, and among others. But this year, I know I am going to be participating, at least in part, because I have just started a Victorian novel that is kind of obscure. You probably never heard of it, but it's rather long. It's this. Yeah. So I just started it now, so it'll probably carry me through, October, when Victober is taking place. By the way, Victober is hosted by Katie over at Books and Things, Kate of Kate Howe, Lucy at Lucy the Reader, and Ange of Beyond the Pages. And there are a few challenges that they have. One is read a book by a Victorian female author, so I guess I have fulfilled that despite the pen name of this author. The second is reread a Victorian book, and the third is read a Victorian book under 250 pages and or over 500 pages. Now, I should note that a book cannot be under 250 pages and over 500 pages, but we're going to leave that aside. And number 4 is Lucy's challenge, which is read an underrated Victorian book. So I think actually 3 out of 4 I'm gonna... Oh no, then there's a general challenge of read by candlelight. So I'm actually thinking that I might achieve 3 out of these 5, because something that hit me with Victober, I was thinking I wasn't much into Victorian literature, but something that hit me just today is that Henrik Ibsen is technically a Victorian author. He was writing during the time of the reign of Victoria. He's not English. He is Norwegian, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this 2019 was supposed to be my year of reading Ibsen, because I read A Doll's House by Ibsen last year, and it was one of my favorite books the entire year. And so I acquired these 2 books last year, and I was like gung-ho about making this year the year of reading a ton of Ibsen, and yet I have not read a single thing by Ibsen this year. So I think I might just try to read some Ibsen during Victober, and I think that would fulfill reading a Victorian book under 250 pages, obviously, because plays are short. And what else? And I might reread a Victorian book, because I read A Doll's House last year, and in this collection, 4 plays, one of the plays is A Doll's House, and I may consider rereading it, so I may actually fulfill that one. So anyway, that's my little shout out to Victober. The next read-along is called Gone with the Books. Read-along. I don't know if it's called a read-along, but anyway, it's sort of an event. It's hosted by Mel over at Mel's Bookland Adventures. By the way, I will leave links to everyone who I'm talking about here. And this is actually based on a kind of interesting idea on the fact that in this fall season there tends to be a lot of reading events. Like in September, I guess we have ShakeTube. October, there's Victober. November, there's Nonfiction November. And it's sort of based on the idea that probably by the end of each of these events, you will be sort of sick of what the events are about. And, I don't know if I can say that quite about ShakeTube, although we are reading The Two Gentlemen of Verona next week, which, as far as Shakespeare plays go, that is the one that you would be sick of if you're going to be sick of a Shakespeare play. But anyway, it sort of starts in September and goes into October and November. So the idea is that in the last week of each of these 3 months, October, November, you read a book that was published between 1900 and 1950. Mel is a big aficionado of literature from that time, and so that was kind of a big motive behind this read-along. And so I thought I would at least put out some books from between 1900 and 1950 that I'm interested in reading. Because recently I read The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton, and that was published in 1905, and it just reminded me how much I love early 20th century literature. So I thought that sounded like a cool read-along. I also happen to have some books that have been on my mind lately as books that I would like to read soon. The first two are books. So one of the months that this read-along takes place over the course of is November. So, which is not for nonfiction November, and I do have a nonfiction book I'm going to talk about there. So I'll save that one for the third. Actually, I have 4 books, so we'll see if I can fit those in. But so first off, I have Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. This is a little Penguin mass market paperback. As I just said, I read The House of Mirth recently, and I loved it. I do hope to do a video about it. I tried to record that today and wasn't successful, so we'll see if I actually manage to get that video out. But I'll hopefully do a wrap-up where I can talk about that book a little bit if I don't get the video out. But I loved it, and so I want to read some more Edith Wharton, and this is a skinny little thing. Not only is it skinny, the margins in this edition are gigantic. So this is going to be a quick read. So there's that. Next book that's been much on my mind from between 1900 and 1950 is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. I just recently and finally finished Dubliners after like 10 months of working on it, of chipping away at it, and it just reminded me that I want to read more Joyce, and Portrait of the Artist is the natural next step after Dubliners. This is a volume that includes both of those books, and if I read A Portrait of the Artist, then that sort of sets the stage for next year to be possibly the year of reading Ulysses for me. We will see if that happens, but if it does, you will of course know about it. But that's not the book I would hope to read. And then nonfiction November, I actually have 2 nonfiction books, so I'll talk about them both. The first is The Future of an Illusion by Sigmund Freud, skinny little thing, but this is a book about Freud's ideas about religion, which I find Freud's ideas interesting in general. I don't put much stock in them. I don't believe in them. I like to say that Freud was a genius who was full of shit. But I find his thinking very interesting to read about, and I think he was a good writer too. He's very engaging to read, not easy but engaging, which I think is a good place to be as a writer. So I like him, and I'm interested in his thought. So there's that, and it's a skinny little, it's like 70 pages long. And the next one is 3 Guineas by Virginia Woolf, and I named Virginia Woolf as one of my favorite writers, and I haven't read a new book by her in quite some time, and I've had this book on my shelf for a while, and this is kind of an anti-war polemic, as I understand it, that she wrote, and that is something I'm interested in, because being anti-war is, a good thing. But yeah, I just haven't read much by her in a long time, and A Room of One's Own, her other nonfiction book that I've read, I absolutely love. One of my favorite nonfiction books ever, so perhaps I will read this, finally. So anyway, that was just a quick sort of TBR, pile of possibilities, etc. Give me any thoughts on these books if you have them. Thank you to Mel and the hosts of Victober for hosting these events. And this was just a quick video for me to put out, because I find these kinds of videos fun to record, and people seem to like them, and I like to talk to you guys, so anyway, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll talk to you all in my next video. Bye, guys.